Hello? We go for walks in the daytime to the woods, and it feels like the most beautiful thing I have seen for a long time. London has never been this quiet, and the sound of all the birds echoing round the hills and trees is more peaceful than any silence. There is a spot I like in particular, right on the edge where a crumbly wooden fence topped with barbed wire separates the woods and the allotment stretching across a field. The wide open space unblocked by trees is well elevated, and in this spot you get the clearest view of the London skyline that I have seen. I have always disliked the glorification of city skylines, connotative of metropolis and money, organisations and companies that stretch into the sky so as to reduce people into pixels. At this time it doesn't seem so threatening. The sense of malice and impenetrable wealth is suspended as the city becomes a quivering wreck. This morning I walked past a hearse with both Dad and Grandad spelt out in flowers along the windows. When we paused at our viewing spot, as we often do, we noticed three strange shapes in the trees directly above us. I thought for a moment that there was rubbish caught up in the branches, but we realised we were looking at three young tawny owls, still covered in soft fluffy down. We had never seen owls this close before. It was almost miraculous to come across them this way. I was surprised that they didn't move away. They remained undisturbed by us looking at them and seemed just as content gazing at the three of us in return. A new sense of wonder followed the rest of our walk as we remained giddy from the discovery. This period of isolation has been restricting, but I am not befallen by a sense of oppression for how reminiscent it is of my childhood home. I can't imagine how it must feel for those that have never felt isolation of this scale before. A child of the countryside knows it well. This sense of confinement, limited space, but also a limit of what is available to discover can hang heavy on the psyche. Distance restricts reach, and from that a sense of place dominates. I think of my father, who for the longest time has worked from home on his own. Not everyone is allowed adventure, though some need it. Places of work and domestic life are infusing on a large scale, but this is not a new practice for those who have never had a separation of the physicality or concept of either. Nature can pacify the isolation. It allows place to start dissolving into space, and in that sense we don't feel our own weight as much. A few days later I returned to that place alone, and as always now, look up at the tree that situated the owls. I don't really expect to see them, but enjoy recording their presence. I now know the empty space by the absence of their bundled forms. I looked over across the allotments to see if anyone else was there and began preparing what I had decided to do when I woke up. Pulling my bag close to my back so it wouldn't jostle, I used the thick rubber of my boot to press down on the barbed wire on top of the fence. Using the support of a nearby tree to hoist myself on top of the horizontal wooden plank, I balanced for just a second before jumping down to the other side. I picked up my tripod and walked over to an empty spot that looked over the dramatic landscape without any obstruction. Dulwich College stood out of the surrounding trees, and the rest of the sprawling skyline hung mistily in the back. I had recently been told that the 3D printers at Dulwich College was being used to help make more ventilators. As I was filming, I noticed a man very far away attending to his allotment. I couldn't tell if he'd seen me or not, but he had made no move in my direction. I wanted to film him, but I wondered if that was breaking some moral code, especially after he'd been leaving me alone. When I got back to the fence, I realised that the ground on this side was slightly lower, creating a taller obstacle to get over. There was a wooden pallet nearby, and I used that as a step up towards the fence so I could wedge my boot in its same foothold. When I turned to review the state of the fence, I noticed it had sagged a little more, but I reassured myself that it wasn't noticeable damage given that its state of shabbiness preceded my activity. When I returned a few days later, the fence had been reinforced with thick branches, and the wooden pallet was gone. The woods remind me of a particular visit to my parents' new home. We walked across the estuary, and it was quite remarkable. The tide was out to such an extent that we had never seen before, and we came across many strange things. A huge washed-up jellyfish dented into the sand. It looked like something from space. The oceans feel as otherworldly as space, an unquantifiable depth and dimension that will throw things up from time to time. There were some huge chunks of concrete and brick, the crumbling ruins of a structure dating back to the Second World War. I couldn't tell if they were emerging from the sand or sinking down into it. 2 dead sheep spaced away from one another that must have been caught up in the tide and swept away from their homes in the dunes. The mood was sombre, and a sense of detachment gave way to an awareness that my parents were in the final place they will live. Things can seem so fragile, and I wonder if I am giving up something too precious. A preemptive sense of regret swirls around my tread across the sand. Feelings of sentimentality catch me off guard like white socks on grass, an owl mistaken for a plastic bag, a grey and red woodpecker sending little torrents of wood chip confetti to the ground.